Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you is something most men learn far too late, usually after they've already lost their self-respect, trying to chase someone who made them feel invisible. If a woman is ignoring you, it's not confusion, it's not a mystery, and it's definitely not a challenge you're supposed to win by trying harder. And I know that might go against everything you've been told about persistence and effort, but in the world of attraction and respect, those rules don't always apply the way you think they do. You've probably been in that situation where you send a message, and she takes hours or even days to reply, or maybe she sees it and says nothing at all. You start overthinking, replaying every interaction in your head, wondering if you said something wrong, or if there's something you need to fix. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start adjusting yourself just to get a little bit of her attention. That's where the problem begins. I'm speaking to you as a woman, and I'm going to be honest in a way most people won't. When a woman ignores a man, she is observing how he reacts. She is watching whether he stays grounded in his own value or whether he begins to chase, to plead, or to shrink himself just to stay in her orbit. And what you do in that moment determines everything. So before you click away or dismiss this as just another video telling you to play it cool, I want you to stay with me. Keep an open mind, because this isn't about playing games. This is about understanding human nature, protecting your self-respect, and moving through life with a level of calm power that most men never develop. If you're ready to stop feeling confused and start moving with intention, then make sure you subscribe and stay until the end, because what I'm about to share with you could completely change the way you approach women, and more importantly, the way you see yourself. 1. Silence is an answer, not a puzzle. When a woman ignores you, the biggest mistake you can make is assuming that there's something hidden you need to decode. You start treating her silence like a riddle, something that requires more effort, more attention, and more emotional investment from you. But the truth is much simpler, and it's also much harder to accept. Silence is already an answer. Think about the teachings of Epictetus, who emphasized that we should focus only on what is within our control and accept what is not. Her response, or lack of it, is not within your control. Your reaction is. And yet, most men do the opposite. They fixate on her behavior and lose control of their own. When you send a message and she ignores it, you have to ask yourself a serious question. Why am I trying to force a connection with someone who is not choosing to engage with me? That question is uncomfortable because it challenges your ego. It forces you to confront the possibility that she is not as interested as you hoped. But that discomfort is where your growth begins. A man who understands his value does not chase clarity from silence. He accepts it and moves accordingly. That doesn't mean becoming cold or bitter. It means becoming grounded. It means recognizing that attention is mutual, not something you beg for or negotiate. I've seen men destroy their own image in a woman's eyes by refusing to accept this. They double text, triple text, send long explanations, try to be funny, try to be emotional, try to be anything that might get a response. And with each attempt, they communicate something they don't even realize, that her attention is more important than their dignity. Now let me ask you something that you need to sit with honestly. If someone showed you through their actions that they were not interested in engaging with you, would you respect yourself more by chasing them or by stepping back and redirecting your energy? Because that's what this comes down to. Respect. Not just from her, but from yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the importance of maintaining inner stability regardless of external circumstances. When you allow someone's silence to disturb your peace, you're giving them control over your emotional state. And once you do that, you've already lost more than just their attention. You've lost your center. The strongest move you can make when a woman ignores you is not to react emotionally, but to respond with calm detachment. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to make a scene. You simply withdraw your attention and continue living your life. Because here's the truth most men don't want to hear. The moment you stop chasing, two things happen. Either she becomes curious and re-engages, or she disappears completely. And both outcomes are good for you. One reveals interest, the other reveals truth. 2. Your attention is your leverage. I want you to understand something deeply, because this is where most men completely misunderstand attraction. Attention is not just something you give, it's something that has value, and the way you distribute it determines how people perceive you. When a woman ignores you and you continue to give her your attention freely, you are lowering its value. You are telling her without words that she doesn't need to invest anything to receive your time, your energy, or your focus. And when something is given without effort, it is rarely appreciated. Seneca often spoke about the importance of valuing your time because it is the one thing you can never get back. Yet look at how casually most men give it away, especially to someone who has already shown a lack of interest. They check their phone constantly. They wait for a reply. They put their life on pause for a possibility that may never come. Now think about this from a different angle. Imagine a man who is busy building his life, focused on his purpose, surrounded by meaningful work and real connections. When he sends a message and doesn't receive a response, he doesn't spiral. He doesn't overanalyze. He simply continues with what he was already doing. Not as an act, but because his life does not revolve around one person's attention. Which man do you think naturally commands more respect? The truth is, women are highly perceptive when it comes to energy and behavior. They can sense when a man is centered in his own life versus when he is orbiting around theirs. And the difference is everything. If you act like her attention is scarce and precious, she will believe it is. If you act like your attention is valuable and not easily given, she will feel that too. This is not manipulation. This is alignment. Your behavior must reflect your self-worth. But let me challenge you with something deeper. Why are you so quick to give your attention to someone who hasn't earned it? Is it because you're genuinely interested or because you're seeking validation? That question matters, because if you're chasing validation, no amount of attention from her will ever feel like enough. You will always want more, always fear losing it, always feel slightly off balance. And that's not attraction, that's dependency. A grounded man gives attention as a choice, not as a need. He engages when there is mutual interest and withdraws when there is not. He doesn't punish, he doesn't play games, but he also doesn't overextend himself. So when a woman ignores you, the correct response is not to increase your effort. It is to reassess where your attention is going, pull it back, invest it in your goals, your growth, your real connections. Because the moment you stop pouring energy into a one-sided interaction, you regain control over your time and your mind. And here's something most men only realize after experience teaches them the hard way. The less you chase attention, the more naturally it comes to you. Not because you're trying to attract it, but because you're no longer desperate for it. So ask yourself this and answer it honestly. Are you using your attention as a tool of self-respect, or are you giving it away in hopes that someone else will finally see your value? Because until you get that right, no strategy, no advice, and no technique will truly work for you. Or 3, do not reward inconsistency. There's something I need you to understand about human behavior, and it applies far beyond dating. People repeat what gets rewarded. If a woman ignores you, disappears, gives you minimal effort, and then comes back to you whenever she feels like it, and you welcome her back every single time with the same enthusiasm, you are teaching her exactly how to treat you. And I'm not saying she's doing this consciously. Most of the time, it's not some calculated plan. It's simply the natural outcome of your behavior. You're showing her that she can give you the bare minimum and still have full access to your attention, your time, and your emotional energy. Now think about that for a moment. If someone can ignore you for days, come back with a simple, "Hey," and you immediately respond like nothing happened, what incentive does she have to change? This is where most men get it wrong. They think being understanding, patient, and always available will make them more attractive. But what it actually does is remove all structure, all boundaries, and all sense of consequence. And without those, respect slowly fades. Epictetus spoke about the importance of self-discipline and not allowing external events to dictate your internal state. But discipline also shows up in what you tolerate. If you tolerate inconsistency, you will receive more of it. Let me give you a real-world scenario. A woman ignores your messages for 2 days, then suddenly replies late at night when she's bored or when her other options aren't available. If you immediately engage, laugh, flirt, and continue the conversation as if nothing happened, you've just reinforced the pattern. You've told her, "This works. I can disappear and come back whenever I want." But imagine a different response. Not emotional, not angry, not dramatic, just measured. You don't rush to reply. You don't reward the inconsistency with instant attention. You respond when it fits your time, your energy, your standards, or sometimes you don't respond at all because you've already moved on. That shift changes everything. It communicates that your attention is not automatic. It must be met with consistency and respect. Now let me challenge you with something uncomfortable. Why do you feel the need to accept behavior that you wouldn't even tolerate from a friend? Would you be okay with a friend constantly ignoring you and only showing up when it's convenient for them? Probably not. So why lower your standards in a romantic context? Marcus Aurelius wrote about living in accordance with your values and not compromising your character for the approval of others. When you allow inconsistency, you are compromising, not for connection, but for the possibility of it. And here's the truth. A woman who is genuinely interested in you will not be consistently inconsistent. She may be busy, she may have a life, but there will be a clear pattern of effort. You won't feel like you're chasing shadows or trying to catch moments of attention. So when a woman ignores you and then reappears, the question is not, how do I keep her interested? The real question is, does her behavior meet my standard? That's a completely different mindset. One puts you in a position of pursuit, the other puts you in a position of selection. And once you start selecting instead of chasing, everything about your interactions changes. 4. Stop trying to prove your worth. One of the most subtle but damaging habits men develop is the need to prove themselves to a woman who is not giving them attention. The moment she starts ignoring you, something inside you shifts. You begin to feel like you need to do more, say more, be more, just to remind her why she should be interested. You might try to be funnier, more charming, more impressive. You might share more about your life, your achievements, your ambitions, hoping that something will catch her attention and pull her back in. But what you don't realize is that this entire approach is built on a flawed assumption, that your worth is something that needs to be demonstrated to someone who isn't even investing in you. Seneca warned about the dangers of seeking validation from external sources because it puts your sense of self in the hands of others. And that's exactly what happens here. The more you try to prove your worth to someone who is ignoring you, the more you communicate that you don't fully believe in it yourself. A man who knows his value does not feel the need to convince someone to see it. He presents himself honestly, and if the interest is not mutual, he moves on without trying to force it. Let me make this very clear. Attraction is not built through persuasion. You cannot argue someone into liking you. You cannot perform your way into genuine interest. It either develops naturally through mutual engagement or it doesn't. And when it doesn't, the most powerful thing you can do is accept it with dignity. Now ask yourself this question and answer it without excuses. If you truly believed in your own value, would you still feel the need to chase someone who is ignoring you? Because that's where the real issue lies. It's not about her behavior. It's about how her behavior makes you question yourself. I've seen men lose themselves in this process. They start overanalyzing every word, every interaction, every detail. They become hyper-aware of how they're perceived, constantly adjusting themselves in hopes of getting a reaction. And in doing so, they move further and further away from authenticity. But here's what you need to understand. The right woman does not require you to become someone else to earn her attention. She responds to who you already are. So instead of trying to prove your worth to someone who is not engaging, redirect that energy into becoming a man who is undeniable. Not because he's trying to impress, but because he's aligned with himself. Focus on your purpose. Build your life. Strengthen your discipline. Cultivate your mindset. When you do that, your presence speaks for itself. You don't need to convince anyone. And the moment you let go of the need to prove yourself, something shifts internally. You become calmer, more grounded, less reactive. You stop chasing validation and start operating from a place of self-respect. That's when your interactions with women change, not because you're trying to manipulate outcomes, but because you're no longer dependent on them. 5. Give her the gift of your absence. This is the part most men struggle with the most because it requires patience, discipline, and a level of emotional control that doesn't come naturally at first. When a woman ignores you, your instinct is to close the gap, to reach out again, to reestablish connection as quickly as possible, but sometimes the most powerful move is to do the opposite. Absence, when used correctly, is not a game. It's a boundary. It's a way of saying, without words, that your presence is not something to be taken for granted. When you continue to show up for someone who is not showing up for you, your presence becomes expected. It loses its impact. But when you step back, when you remove your attention and your availability, you create space. And in that space, clarity begins to form. Now, I'm not telling you to disappear in hopes that she will come running back. That mindset is still rooted in outcome dependence. You're still focused on what she will do rather than what you need to do for yourself. The real purpose of your absence is not to trigger her reaction. It's to restore your balance. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on the importance of withdrawing into oneself, not as a form of escape, but as a way to regain clarity and strength. When you step away from a situation where you are being ignored, you give yourself the opportunity to reset, to detach from the emotional pull and see things as they truly are. And sometimes something interesting happens. When you stop reaching out, when you stop being available, she may notice, she may reach out, curious about your sudden absence. But if that happens, you must remain grounded. You must not fall back into the same patterns that led you here in the first place, because if nothing changes in your behavior, nothing will change in hers. Let me ask you something that might challenge your perspective. If your presence in her life made no difference if she could take it or leave it, why are you fighting so hard to stay? That question is not meant to discourage you. It's meant to wake you up. Your time, your energy, your attention. These are all valuable, and they should be given to people who recognize that value, not to those who overlook it. So when a woman ignores you, don't chase her attention. Give her your absence, not as a tactic, but as a reflection of your self-respect. Because the man who is willing to walk away from what does not serve him is the man who ultimately attracts what does. 6. Control your emotional reactions. This is where everything you've heard so far either becomes real or falls apart. Because it's one thing to understand these ideas intellectually, and it's another thing entirely to live them when your emotions are pulling you in the opposite direction. When a woman ignores you, it doesn't just affect your thoughts, it affects your pride, your ego, and sometimes even your sense of identity. And if you're not careful, you'll react in ways that undo all your self-respect in a matter of seconds. Let's be honest about what usually happens. You feel the urge to check your phone constantly. You replay conversations in your head, trying to find where things changed. You start imagining scenarios, questioning yourself, wondering if she's talking to someone else or if you've already lost your chance. And then, driven by that emotional tension, you act. You send another message. You try to get her attention. You break your own frame. This is exactly what you must learn to control. Epictetus taught that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. Her silence is just that, silence. But the story you attach to it is what creates the emotional storm. And once you're caught in that storm, your actions become reactive instead of intentional. A grounded man does not suppress his emotions, but he does not let them dictate his behavior either. He feels the discomfort, acknowledges it, and still chooses a response that aligns with his values. Think about the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate, emotional, and often impulsive. Responding is measured, calm, and deliberate. When you react to being ignored, you hand over control. When you respond with composure, you take it back. Now ask yourself something honestly. How many times have you acted in a way that you later regretted simply because you couldn't sit with the discomfort of uncertainty? That question matters because discipline is built in those exact moments. Not when things are easy, not when everything is going your way, but when you feel that internal pressure to act and you choose not to. Seneca spoke about training the mind to remain steady in the face of adversity. And while being ignored might not seem like a major life challenge, it reveals something deeper about your emotional control. If a simple lack of response can destabilize you, then there is work to be done internally. So what do you do instead? You pause, you step back, you redirect your focus, you go to the gym, you work on your goals, you spend time with people who actually engage with you. You remind yourself that your life is bigger than one interaction. And most importantly, you give yourself time, because emotions lose their intensity when they are not constantly fed by your attention. Over time, this becomes your default. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop chasing closure. You become someone who can sit in uncertainty without losing his composure. And that alone sets you apart. 7. Choose yourself every single time. Everything we've talked about leads to this final point, because without it, none of the others will truly stick. When a woman ignores you, the situation is not really about her. It's about the decision you make in response to it. Do you choose her attention, or do you choose yourself? Most men, if they're honest, choose her. They choose the possibility of her. They choose the idea of what could be over the reality of what is. And in doing so, they slowly abandon their own standards, their own boundaries, and their own sense of worth. But a man who understands himself moves differently. He doesn't see being ignored as a challenge to overcome or a problem to fix. He sees it as information, clear, direct information about where he stands in that person's life. And with that information, he makes a decision. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that you have power over your mind, not outside events. When a woman ignores you, that is an outside event. What you do next, that is your power. Choosing yourself means you do not stay where you are not valued. It means you do not invest where there is no return. It means you walk away, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of clarity. And let me tell you something that many people won't say out loud. Walking away is not a loss. Staying where you are not respected is. Now, I want you to really think about this. If you continue to give your time, your energy, and your attention to someone who ignores you, what are you teaching yourself about your own worth? Because self-respect is not built through words. It's built through actions, through the standards you set and the boundaries you enforce. When you choose yourself, something shifts internally. You stop seeking approval. You stop chasing validation. You start living in a way that reflects your values, not your fears. And ironically, that's when your interactions with women improve the most. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because you're no longer dependent on their reactions. You become selective. You become calm. You become someone who values his own time and expects others to do the same. And the right women, those who are aligned, consistent, and genuinely interested, will respond to that energy naturally. But even if they didn't, you would still be in a better position, because you're no longer compromising yourself for the sake of attention. That is the real win. If a woman ignores you, the answer is not to chase harder, try more, or prove yourself louder. The answer is to step back, stay grounded, and let your actions reflect your self-respect. Accept what is in front of you, control your reactions, and never give your time and energy to someone who does not value it. Choose yourself every single time, and everything else will begin to align from there. If this opened your eyes, subscribe and come back for more, because the way you move in these moments defines the kind of man you become.